Hi guys, I'm Erin Daber. I am the founder of Well Balanced Accountants, and I'm here with my good friend Nikki Winston. We are coming to you to support you on your CPA exam journey.
Yes.
She and I both work with CPA candidates across the country, but in different ways. So we're first of all excited to introduce ourselves to you and then launch into some of our top 10 most frequently asked questions. So why don't I let you introduce yourself, Nikki, and then I can provide a little bit more background about sort of what I do, and we can just jump into it and start answering some of these questions. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me. So, hey guys, as Erin said, I am Nikki Winston, and Erin and I have gone through the CPA exam journey, and we've learned a lot along the way. And so we realized that a lot of you are struggling with what courses to take and how to study and all those different questions that are swirling in your mind. So we are here to put your mind at ease and answer these questions for you.
So for people that don't know you, Nikki, how is it that you work with people on the CPA exam?
So my firm is the Winston CPA Group. We are based in Atlanta, Georgia. Um, and I actually coach and tutor CPA exam candidates. It actually started out of demand where I would post different things on Instagram about the CPA exam, and then people would jump in my DMs and just ask me a ton of questions. And so I said, well, I think what I need to do is to really have some one-on-one time with the candidates and really help them talk through some of those topics that that they struggle with. And I've come to love it. I mean, everybody knows my 1,373 day struggle with the CPA exam, and so I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the content, the exam, how to prepare, and what it takes to be successful. So it's my obligation to share that with other candidates.
I love it. I love how you talk about your 1,373 day journey. I feel like other
Listen,
people get
I
that.
X those days off the calendar like I was in prison. Like, okay, another
Yeah.
day down. Let's keep it moving. So, yeah.
So I guess for those of you out there who might be on day 500 and something, keep
Mhm.
going because you will
Yes.
get there. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes. Yes. So, Erin, tell us about your story and how you got started with CPA candidates.
Yes. Well, I passed my CPA exam in 2009. I did not have maybe the rough road type of journey that I see many candidates having, but shortly after passing my exam, I realized that the technical side of accounting was not where I was most gifted. It was not where I was most able to give my gifts to the world, if you want to think of it
Mhm.
that way. Just not my area of expertise and not the kind of job that brought me joy. So that was kind of scary in that moment, thinking, oh my gosh, I've just not only gotten a degree in accounting, I've also sacrificed a lot of time to pass this exam, and now I don't like what I'm doing.
Oh,
Maybe I made a huge mistake, and eventually found my way to coaching, which is the perfect way for me to marry my experience and my background in accounting with accounting folks, but not have to
yep.
do the technical side of it. So that's where I find myself now. And a big part of that really is the CPA exam, of course. It's where a lot of people get stuck in their careers, or, they progressed up to a point and then can't get beyond it. So really, as part of my commitment to growing the profession and moving the profession forward, part of that is also making sure that those really good quality candidates don't leave early because they can't pass the exam.
Right.
So that's why I'm here. And similar to you, I'm working one-on-one and also in online programs to help people pass the exam, but we're not looking at any of the technical content. So I'm
Okay.
helping with a lot of the motivation, the planning, the execution, and even day of, especially after you've failed a couple times, going in and being really confident with your study approach, with your preparation, and crushing it
Mhm.
on exam day.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. So for me, because I spent so much time studying, I have all of my notes, all of my flashcards, and I had gotten to a point where I stopped using the study materials and I started making my own notes. And that was really what helped me. So to your point, as far as advancing the profession, specifically for people of color, we tend to have the highest quote unquote dropout rates, where we fail one exam and then we're like, okay, no, this is not for me, so I'm just going to quit. So I spoke at the NABA Southern Region Student Conference a couple of weeks ago, and it was basically about the CPA exam. It was a CPA boot camp. The audience was full of accounting majors, new grads, or people new in their profession who were on the fence about, do I study? Do I go to work? Do I go to grad school? And as I was preparing for that speaking engagement, I was looking at the stats. Like, you have the Blacks and the Hispanics who quit at maybe 3 times the rate of other candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a number of factors, but a huge part is it is defeating and it is a crush to your gut when you get that fail. And because we don't always have these type of resources to help us get over the hump, that's why a lot of us drop out of the race. Because I probably purchased some or all of every single review course out there. I bought all of the books from Barnes and Noble about the CPA exam, and I didn't have a person who I could sit down with at the table and say, okay, I'm struggling with statement of cash flows, or how do I make sense of the audit content? So a lot of the time that I spent on the journey, I was stumbling along the way, but I was learning a lot about myself and about the content. So I think us doing this is an amazing thing for all candidates to kind of see different sides and what it really takes to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love that. So you kind of set us up, but I guess for context for those of you watching, we have a our top 10 most frequently asked questions that I compiled and that Nikki compiled from both of our audiences, and a lot of them overlapped. So you're in luck. We're going to address all of them. But for today, our big focus is that question you just threw out. So I've just graduated. Do I start with the exam? Do I go to grad school? Do I start working? What's my next step, right? Once I'm done with undergrad, now what? What's the most, logical or the best choice? And then we'll also tap into how to get motivated to start with the exam. Once you've figured out your path, how do we get motivated? And we'll address a lot of other things too in our future series, our future videos of this series, but that's what we're tackling today.
Yes.
So since you kind of opened the door for it to that question about what do I do next, what are your thoughts about the most logical or most efficient path to CPA?
Yeah, so first and foremost, congratulations to anybody who just graduated, because the accounting curriculum, as we all know, is a beast. And some of us get out in 4 years, some of us get out in 5, some of us get out in 7. But it really depends on where you are. A lot of the curriculums have changed to try and accommodate the education requirements to sit for the CPA. But a lot of students find themselves going back to grad school to simply meet that credit hour requirement. Semester hours, not to be confused with credit hours, because I had that issue with meeting my education requirement because I went to the Ohio State University, and at the time we were on quarters. And then after I graduated, we switched to semesters. And so my hours were calculated based on semesters. Well, 1 quarter is 2/3 of a semester. So I had to go back to school just to meet the requirement. So if you don't meet the requirement, that's kind of the natural next step to go to grad school and get those hours. Now, we talked about the 4 years to 5 years to 7 years. There are some students who are like, look, I need to put this degree to use. I have student loans. I want to go to work. I want to make some money. And that's totally fine. And the benefit to that is you may work for an employer who sponsors some or all of your exam fees, your review courses, your actual license, the CPEs. So that's an added incentive to going to work. But the drawback to that is now that you're working full time, you have to do better with managing your time and being disciplined, right? Because
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
tough. And speaking from experience, it's tough to work 8 to 5 or 8 to 6 or however long, and then you go home and study for 3 or 4 hours every day. So
Yeah.
it really depends on where you are. I like to tell people start sooner than later. Again, from personal experience, because
Right.
when I started
Yeah.
it, I was married, I had a husband, a house, 2 kids, running an accounting department, which in itself is demanding. So I always tell students, try to do it sooner than later while you don't have those additional responsibilities to kind of hinder your progress.
I would agree with that 100%. I think if there's anything consistent about the commentary that I hear from my clients is I wish I had started sooner.
Yep.
So that is absolute. Whether you choose to go back to work or grad school, I think just prioritizing this exam as much as possible, it's just going to make your life so much easier.
Right.
And I think it's important too to have candidates look at first of all, recognize the distinction between the requirements to sit for the exam and the requirements to become licensed. So
Right.
that's different in every state. So at least in California, where I am, you can sit for the exam with only 120 credit hours, which is right after your undergrad degree is
Yeah.
complete in most places. And then if you want to get licensed after you've passed the exams, then you need more.
That one,
So
it's I think 150 in most
right.
jurisdictions.
It
So
goes up to 150 to be
yeah.
licensed. So
Yeah.
that's just something for everyone to be aware of what the requirements are in your specific jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
And that can impact the order too. So if you do decide to go to work or put off grad school, doesn't mean you have to put off the exam
Right.
until after grad school necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
You can also get that 150 without doing graduate school. So, for budgeting purposes, I know a lot of candidates choose not to necessarily pursue a higher degree, but go ahead and just take some classes online or through a community college. So again, there's a lot of different options. And to your point too about working, I think the only other thing I would add about that is some employers will pay even if you've started before you work.
Mm-hmm.
So if you feel like what would help you to pass is to start doing that before you're working, I would just
Right.
talk to that future employer and say, look, I'm scheduled to start with you in October or January. Will you reimburse my fees?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you have to float the cost for a little bit, but
Right.
they'll get you back once you're done. So
Right.
really, I would just say to think about what's going to work best for you, really set you up for success before, and take that path. Make
Yeah.
sure that it's going to work for you, not necessarily what works for somebody else.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up having the conversation with your employer, because I actually had a client who was studying for the exam. And of course, we dig into the content and all of that, but I like to have what I call sidebar conversations, like outside
Mhm.
of the studying and the multiple choice questions and the Sims. How are you feeling? How are things going? And we got into talking about work. And I'm like, so what does your employer think? And she's like, oh, I haven't even told them. And I'm like, first of all, that explains why when you're calling in from work, they probably think you're just playing around when you're calling in because you're trying to study.
Yeah.
Or she worked for a pretty big company. And so I said, you're probably leaving money on the table. They probably are going to say, oh my God, why didn't you tell us? We have a program, we have reimbursement, we have sponsorship. And
Mhm.
so it's really important to be vocal and communicate what you have going on to your employer, because you're going to need time off to actually take the exam to study. If you get off work at 6 and you go home and study from 10 to 4, then it's going to be a struggle to get up and go back to work at 8 o'clock. So they can kind of empathize with your situation, especially because your boss or your peers or somebody else might already be a CPA, so they know what it takes to get there. So it only benefits you if you decide to take the path to go straight into your profession, to let your employer know what's going on.
Yeah. Most employers, I would say, are very supportive, at least that I've seen. And they can even sometimes accommodate your workload. They can do
Mm-hmm.
different things, but More often than not, I don't know how it was with your client, Nikki, but a lot of times when I hear people not telling people or doing the CPA exam in secret, like they're over here like with their books, don't let anybody know. It's because of that fear of failure. It's more of a fear-based conversation, right? If I fail, I want to fail in private. I don't want anybody else to know about it.
Yeah.
Which
I mean,
I
you get
understand.
tired of people asking like, oh, so you're still studying? Like I got that so many times. Like, are you done? Are you still studying? And to have to explain it like, well, I was almost done, but then I failed and I lost credit. And I mean, it's just an annoying conversation to have. And so that makes sense. But one more thing on the work, and then we can kind of move on, is another struggle that she had is, well, you kind of, moved out of the corporate sector, but with month-end close, I mean, and just from being a CPA, those deadlines are hardcore. And she was constantly falling behind or at work till 9 or 10 o'clock at night because she had dual screens, right? And she was supposed to be recording journal entries and doing all this other stuff, but she was studying. So instead of you getting your work done by end of day 3 of close, then you're sitting here trying to do practice questions and you're falling behind. So now it's becoming a performance issue, which can get you in trouble for no reason. So that's another important aspect to letting your employer know what's going on.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at some point, about planning and how to work studying into your work schedule and into your life.
Yeah, it's important. It's important. Yeah. So let's talk about another thing that I get all the time is, especially with it taking me so long, is how did you, people ask me all the time about motivation. Like, how do you keep going? How do you stay motivated to study when you don't want to, or when you get that failing score, that 74 when all you needed was a 75, and how do you keep going? So talk to us a little bit, Erin, about your tips and what you share with your clients as far as staying motivated.
Absolutely. Yeah. Motivation is so critical. And it's one of those things, like when you set goals, we think we're going to go from point A to point B and it's going to be nice and smooth and we've got it all planned out and it's going to be wonderful. And if that were the case, you don't need a whole lot of motivation, right? You just go do it and it's done. But we all know that that's not how this usually goes. So we've got to have, I think the critical thing about motivation is that it has to be big enough. Whatever that driving force is that is pulling you towards CPA, it has to be big enough, not for the sunny days, but for the rainy days and the snowy days and the days when it's like the last thing in the world that you want to be doing. Those are the days when we really need to like pull ourselves up and go for it more than ever. If it's just the easy days, anybody could do it. So so a couple of things. The what's in it for me is a really important question, I think, to ask at the early stages. And from my experience, money is not enough. So that's in it for a lot of people, right? You get an increased salary, maybe a bonus, but it's very easy. I know for me especially, I can say, well, yeah, I'd love an extra $10,000. And then the next day I think, well, but I've been living just fine without it. So I don't really need it, do I? Right? It's a really fleeting thing where we can say, well, I don't need it that bad.
Right.
So money's usually not enough. It's got to be something that means more to you. Something about the impact that you're going to be able to make once you're licensed, or your future career path, what it means to you personally, maybe things you could learn from this process, not just on the technical side of things, but maybe what you can learn about yourself in the process. I think for a lot of CPA candidates too, who are parents, I'd like to talk to them about what is the learning lesson you're going to be able to share with your kids through this process, right? So really getting down below the surface to truly what's driving me to do this. So that's the important, like, deep inner work that we have to do around motivation, because that's what's really going to keep you going forward. And then on more of a surface level and just for fun, I love rewards. So, having a reward in place for when you pass not only all 4 exams, although there should definitely be a big reward in place.
Yeah, indeed.
but also mini rewards for when you've passed each individual part. That's a huge accomplishment to pass any portion of this exam.
Right.
So much deserving of a reward, and that can look like all kinds of different things, whatever
Anything.
really motivates you.
Right. And interestingly, when people ask me that, this is probably the only question I'll answer with another question. Like, how did you stay motivated? I'll say, well, what's your why? Why
Mm-hmm.
are you doing this to begin with? And to your point, it's not all about the money.
Mm-hmm.
There's just, for me, it was, I wanted to drive my own bus when it came to my career, so that if I ever got to the point like, you know what, I think I'm done with corporate America, I'm going to open up my own shop, then I have the credentials to
Yeah.
do so. And then speaking about the credential, the CPA is a very prestigious and highly regarded credential, because I remember before I was a CPA, I was always a CPA in my mind, right? It's all about
Yeah.
mindset. Always a CPA in my mind, but when somebody would say, what do you do? Oh, I'm an accountant, or I work in accounting. It's like, oh, okay. But then when they say, what do you do? And you're like, I'm a CPA. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Right?
Awesome. And it's like, even the non-CPAs are intrigued by that, because they might not know the nuances, but they know that they know about the grind that it took to get there. And so it's an elevated level of respect on your name to be a CPA. But at the same time, you have to think about, why are you doing this? Because there's no blanket answer to that question. And then talking about the candidates with kids, when I was studying, my kids were in school. They still are, but when they would sit at the table and do their homework, I was doing my homework with them. And so that was a part of the reason why I'm like, I can't let them see me quit. And every time I passed, I mean, I was celebrating the whole house. And my husband was like, congratulations. And I was so deep into it that my son was like 6 or 7 at the time. My daughter was about 3. So they kind of knew what was going on. And my son would say, oh, you passed? Good job, mommy. Good job. So
Aw.
just to hear that is like, I can't dare quit on myself, because if I do, I'm quitting on them too. You know what I mean? And so it's funny, because now my daughter is 8 and she's like, mommy, aren't you a CPA? What's a CPA? Because I told my friend that you were a CPA.
Aw.
And she starts asking me all these questions like, so you help people count money and you help other people study? Like every time I say I have a session with a student and I go into my office, she's like, oh, so you're helping somebody else pass the CPA? I said, yeah. So they started to pick up on what I was doing. And so even those nights where I didn't want to study, where it was a long day for month-end close, and I'm just like, I'm running on fumes, I don't have it today. I had to find the energy. I had to find that mental fortitude to keep going. So everybody is going to have a different answer to that question.
Absolutely.
And it's very personal, because everybody has their own reasons. And if you are that person that's like, I want to make more money, that's fine. But it's so much more to it than just the monetary aspect.
Absolutely. I think that's such a perfect example. So that's what we're talking about when we say that why, or the what's in it for me. And that
Yeah.
if you hear that in Nikki's example, that is not a surface level thing, right? That's
Right.
an 8-year-old looking at you with those big bright eyes, like, you're working on this, right? You're passing.
Yes.
Like, you can't deny that at all. That is a powerful thing. And not to say you have to have kids to have that type of motivation,
Right.
but something like that is, and I think people can relate to that, right? Having
Absolutely.
that to pull them forward. So
Absolutely.
my recommendation would be to really early on take the time to discover or really evaluate and reflect for yourself what that is,
Right.
what that big thing is, and then you'll be in really good shape.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Well, those were our topics for today. We will be back in our next series, and we're going to tackle some more of our top 10 FAQs. So
yes.
Make sure to join us then.
Yeah. So as Erin said, this is the first of a series that we're going to do. We are doing this to help y'all, to share our expertise, our strategies, and our tips to really help you get over that CPA exam hump. So when you have those moments when you're staring at that book and you're frustrated and you don't know what to do, we are doing this to help you along the journey. So if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to hit us up on Instagram. I'm at Nick Winston CPA, NIKKWINSTON CPA. And Erin, you're well balanced. Well, I'll let you do it.
Yeah, at Well Balanced Accountants.
Yep.
All one word. You can find me there. We're both sharing tips and things, but we'll also share the links to these videos.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch y'all on round 2.
All right. See you then.
Bye.